So we've got nerfs landing in Marvel Snap, and they're going to hit a couple of the game's most popular cards, one of which you'll see here behind me. So this might be a little bit of a meta shakeup. We've also got some buffs coming as well to a much needed card. I told you guys she was going to be bad. Well, she just got a little bit better. So this latest over-the-air update is pretty meaningful, I think. So let's kick things off here with our good friend Legion. He is one of the most played cards in Marvel Snap right now, and he's going to be going from a 5.8 down to a 5.7. This was actually a change they made pretty late in development, pushing him up to 5.8. We had initially seen him data mined at 5.7. They wanted to make sure people took him seriously. They wrote here, well, we certainly have, because he's absolutely everywhere. Turns out that location disruption, those big unexpected plays, can absolutely steal games sometimes, and you're really not sacrificing much playing a 5.8 when it comes to power. So you're still making good plays on board, and then occasionally just doing things your opponent never expects, which obviously gives you some nice edges when it comes to snapping and cubes. So a really influential card being tossed into lots of different deck shells. And frankly, even as a 5.7, I think this one stays really good. I don't think Legion gets dropped out of decks losing 1 power here. That's still a meaningful enough stat line to be substantial on board, and he still retains all of that surprise value, all of that game-winning plays stays inherent to this card. So I don't think this is going to hurt Legion too much at all. I mean, obviously, a game here and there will be lost because you're short of power, but ultimately, I think a lot of the other decks you're going to be playing against are still going to be running Legion themselves, so they're also going to be taking that little bit of a hit. I don't see this causing Legion, in essence, to fall below other 5-drop options all that often for most decks. So ultimately, stays good, I think, here at 5.7, but absolutely a reasonable nerf to pull down one of the most influential cards in the game. So next up here is Captain Marvel, and she is going down to a 4.4 from a 4.5. Remember, she used to be a 5.6, just recently got buffed. That made her get played in all kinds of decks. Basically, if you got Zabu, Captain Marvel made a ton of sense as a 4.5. She just shores up any weaknesses, make sure you can win some surprise locations. Before, you know, she was a card you used for her utility, specifically like in a lockdown deck or a move deck. You wanted to exploit a specific aspect of her effect. But she got so good as a 4.5, pretty much anybody could kind of run her and still feel like it was worth it. I think that was just a little bit too much for a card like this one. So they're going to pull Captain Marvel back down to 4.4. I think there are still some decks that like this at 4.4 that just need a little bit of extra assurance or go wide enough that just rounding off some of those edges from a power level standpoint is worth it. And just having that flexibility can be really nice. If you're running things like Silk already and you're kind of moving power around, you don't know where things are going to go exactly or if they're going to be perfect where they're supposed to be, this can help fix and shore up some of those problems. So ultimately a card, I think, that still gets played a little, but definitely feels weaker. 4.4 is a bigger sacrifice. Even at 3.4, if you've played a Zabu, doesn't really feel all that competitive from a power standpoint. So this one does sting a little bit more, I think. So next up, Rockslide is going from a 4.5 down to a 3.3, which is a really big change for a number of reasons. Number one, I think that's a significant power drop. For only losing 1 energy, losing 2 power feels bad. I think a 3.4 would have kept him more in line with that original distribution. But also, of course, at 3 costs, no longer benefits from Zabu. Before, you could play a 3.5 with Rockslide and Zabu. Now, you're forced to play a 3.3, which clearly makes it feel like it costs the same in those scenarios where you get Zabu. And if you don't get Zabu, I don't even know if it helps Zabu decks that much that this is cheaper, because on turn 6 you still want to play a 4 and you can't play Rockslide. So the fact that he's 3, he doesn't really weave into those final turns unless you had Zabu down, and if you had Zabu down, of course you'd vastly prefer he were a 4-5. So ultimately, I think a really big hit to Zabu Darkhawk as a pairing, and you can see here the dev comments above me. They talk about a lot how the fact that they just keep nerfing Rockslide instead of Darkhawk, and some of the philosophy here. Listen, I don't know that I understand it completely, or at least I don't know that I agree with it. I would personally attack Darkhawk more directly, because I think Rockslide's a pretty cool card on his own right. I wish he existed outside of Darkhawk specifically. The idea of like being able to disrupt your opponent's deck with rocks and stuff feels good. which, you know, theoretically at 3 energy does come down a turn sooner. There are more chances to draw these rocks, which is cool, but I hate that his power feels like it's taking a bigger hit than necessary, specifically because of his connection to Zabu Darkhawk. So as a 3/4, maybe this is a really interesting card. It's got disruption bundled in. You don't care about Darkhawk so much. Maybe you run it in Surfer for some extra disruption. That sort of thing sounds cool. As a 3/3, feels less interesting to me there. So ultimately, this is, I think, a pretty significant hit to Zabu Darkhawk as an archetype. I think Darkhawk will suffer for this one. Feels far more awkward. Sacrificing a couple points of power basically makes this a little bit clunkier and pulls down some of the ceiling of that deck from a power standpoint. So I'm curious to see how that shakes out, but I think this is pretty impactful, and I don't really know that Rockslide has a home now. I don't think like C3 or Silver Surfer cares as much about that. Maybe it's still in Darkhawk, but it's just much worse. So now let's move on over to some buffs, and kind of saw this one coming. Lady Deathstrike going from 3 power up to 4. 3 power was just a little too weak here. They kind of talk a little bit about how they were willing to push Legion, but weren't willing to push Lady Deathstrike. They thought it might be frustrating if she's wiping out boards. So now giving her some of that power back they were afraid to give her before. And yeah, I mean, 4 power is definitely nicer. There are a lot of things at 3 power out there in the meta. You know, you've got like the Jeffs of the world. You can hit a Jeff now and you couldn't before. That's nice, you know, that's cool. There are like, what else? Killmongers. I'm looking around. There aren't that many things. There's a lot of stuff at 5. Yeah, I mean, there's honestly not that many things that exist at 3. It's literally like Jeff. I mean, people are gonna have other examples, you know, catch a random Killmonger or whatever. But a lot of the meta is operating in that kind of 5 space right now with the Silks and the Spider-Mans and the, well, Captain Marvels before. So I do think at a base level, Lady Deathstrike is still not all that interesting. I don't think she's gonna hit that many extra targets at 4 instead of at 3. Maybe there's some extra things too on your own side of activations where it's useful, but most of the stuff you're trying to destroy was fairly small anyway. Wolverines and you know, Buckies of the world and such. So I don't really know that this breakpoint is especially different. It's definitely more meaningful when you think about things like Shuri. She kind of gains double with Shuri, obviously, because Shuri's doubling her power, so pushing her to 5/8. Like that now hits a Legion, I guess, the freshly nerfed Legion. So there are perhaps, you know, some extra breakpoints there in that like 6 and 7 space. Although still, I think not that many. Like, you know, before 6 was enough to get over 5. So I don't know, man. I'm actually not convinced this is still enough for Lady Deathstrike. I feel like it has more to do with the awkwardness of playing her than the power values. Although obviously there's some point where the power values are big enough. But I still think this card's going to fall behind. I just don't think it's good enough, even at 5/4, based on my experiences with it. But I hope I'm wrong. I want cards like this to be good. She's a really cool, iconic Wolverine villain, so I'd hate her to fall to the wayside. But it does sound like if this doesn't work, they will evaluate a more significant change. So moving on to our final card here, it's actually the Doombot from Dr. Doom is going to go back up to 5 power. This is one they had pushed down to 4 a while ago when Dr. Doom was absolutely everywhere in the meta. Then they mentioned how Spider-Ham showed up and was like countering all these 6 drops really easily, and Spider-Ham's still pretty prominent. So giving Dr. Doom some more upside in the instances where he's not hit by Spider-Ham might be useful to help him feel a little bit better. So yeah, I think Dr. Doom was really good with 5 power before. I think he'll probably have some relevance at 5 power again, particularly like we've talked about. There's so many Spider-Mans and Silks and stuff. 5v4 is actually a pretty big difference in the meta right now. So that's a meaningful breakpoint, I suspect, very often, helping it go toe-to-toe with some of these wide board movie things we're seeing right now. So good change. I think Dr. Doom is welcome in the meta once again. And there you go. That's it for the over-the-air update. I'm curious how you guys think these changes are going to shake out. Which cards are going to see play? Is Lady Deathstrike now amazing? Is Rockslide totally dead? Is Legion still going to get played? Share those thoughts and more down in the comments below. Thanks so much as always for watching. And until next time, game on.